Okay, everyone, we are here today to talk about layoff proofing your career. And the whole point to this is one, if you've been laid off, what do you need to do? Two, if you're worried about layoffs, what can you do that can manage the worry factor? I call them worry mares. That's where you wake up in the middle of the night and you're worried. So, since you don't have a lot of control over whether or not you get laid off, you do have control over things that you can do that will set you up to be in a much less bad situation when and if you get laid off. And so that's really what we're here to talk about today. Now, if you are in a job search and you weren't laid off, it's all still relevant. And if you're happily employed, but you're like, you know what, maybe I should be worried, there's things you can do here. So any of those scenarios, you are in the right place. So, um the good news is that there is a right next job for you out there that will value your talents, skills, and experience, that will provide the experience that will get you to your next promotion, or someone I was just talking to acquire skills that will be relevant in the next thing you want to do, maybe as a startup founder or with your own business someday. So experience can that you get in your next job can help you in very, very many different ways. But it also, obviously, we want those paychecks, we want that work life balance that we need, and we want the company culture and values that matter to us. And all of that is actually out there, even in a wonky economy. The bad news is that being laid off is painful, it's stressful, and your typical job search typically means applying to a lot of jobs without a strategy, hearing nothing back, and then all you're hearing is crickets. And when you do hear back, it's a rejection email. And if you do get an interview, you end up getting ghosted. And none of that sounds like fun, and none of that is fun. So, what most people do is they end up spending a bunch of money on resume writers without knowing what they're looking for. And they end up spending a bunch of time looking for jobs on job posting sites, but they don't really have a clear vision of how am I picking. And if you don't have a clear vision for how you're picking, then you're probably going to up your rejection rate, which is going to up your I feel crappy about my job search rate, which is then going to make you want to hide from your job search and a whole bunch of other things that aren't actually constructive. People end up spending a lot of energy applying to jobs without a strategy. One of my favorite stories is the client who applied to 1,600 jobs before he met me. He landed in 6 weeks. He just needed to tweak some things in his application strategy, in what he was applying, what tools he was using to apply, and then how he interviewed. And all of this, wasting the money and the time and the energy, obviously that sets people up to be like, okay, this isn't working. And wouldn't it be great if I had a game plan before the layoff? So there are things you can do while you're still employed that will make a layoff way less horrible. And two of them are getting clear about what you have to offer and clear about what you want. Hey, first typo in the deck. Hey. The bad news is, just because you know what you want and you have to offer, that is huge and that's the first step. But that doesn't mean you know how to talk about what you have to offer in your profile. And how do you kind of keep an eye on your LinkedIn profile and your career brand while you're employed? Ha ha. And how do you know which experts to listen to about LinkedIn? And how do you know what the love language is for the companies that are your ideal companies, and how to use that on your resume and your LinkedIn profile? And what does customize your resume mean anyway? And so one of the things that I did in my past, so first of all, I've hired a lot of people. I've been the boss of a lot of people. When the fintech startup where I was the VP of operations was sold, 80% of the company worked for me. So we had 500 employees, 400 of them worked for me. The day we announced the acquisition, I stood in the back of the room with the SVP of HR for the acquiring company and greeted every person as they came into the room by name. She thought I was Rain Man, or very, very strange. And yeah, actually, I'm kind of strange. But she's like, how do you know all their names? I'm like, well, 80% of them work for me. And, the other 20% either used to work for me or they work closely with me and my team. So, of course, I know their names. That was my thinking. But beyond that, then did a lot of work with venture-backed tech startups. Did talent strategy, which is like the brains up above recruiting, and then I would hire the first recruiters and train the recruiters to find the right talent. So, among other things, there's other things too, but that's the relevant part of this. So, most people end up listening to every expert, but what they do is then they're like, okay, this expert says this and I do this, and then I hear another expert and I do this, and so there's nothing consistent, and therefore then they're not getting results, and you're just getting more and more and more frustrated because you spent all this money. I've had people come to me after spending hundreds of dollars on resumes, and I'm looking at the resume and going, oh my God. Like, my favorite one recently was the resume where they actually spelled the word resume with a French accent. Now, I used to teach French back in the day, but I don't really know why on earth you would put an accent on the word resume in a English-speaking US-based job search. Okay, but who has time for all this when you're still working, all this wasted time and energy? So if you're still working and you want to layoff proof your situation, you don't have a lot of time. And if you have already been laid off or you are in an active job search, it's not that you don't, quote, have time. It's that you need to be spending it in a smart way because you're already feeling kind of stressed and crappy. And if you're not doing the things that will actually be effective, you're only going to feel worse. So, what if instead of trying to recreate the wheel, you knew who needed what you have to offer? You knew what the right next step for your career was. You knew how to build your brand. And we're going to talk a fair amount about the LinkedIn profile part of this, but the resume is part of it too. And you know how to use a target company's love language to brand yourself as their ideal candidate. And if you knew all that without wasting time, energy, or money on wrong things, and if you could even do it while you're still employed, added bonus. So, in case you don't know, I think you all know because I kind of invited you to be here, but I am Wendy Taylor. I'm the founder and coach of Taking Charge. I help people make more money in better, happier jobs. I also am the ADHD whisperer. So if you are team ADHD, you're in the right place too. At Taking Charge, we're on a mission to create a career design for your whole life. What that means is, and I literally said that to the folks in my program yesterday, your significant others, your spouses, your children are the stakeholders in this job search. So is your health. So are any passions and interests you have. Because when we make a good job change decision, all those things benefit. So my favorite testimonials aren't the ones that talk about how much more money they're making or how good it was for their career or their promotion track or whatever, even though that's all wonderful. And I totally celebrate that. The ones I really love is I'm healthier. My friends notice the difference. And my marriage is stronger. My children are doing better in school. Everybody is thriving because of the change I made. That's what I love. And you can be like me. And your stakeholders are other things. It's, for me, it's my music interests or my elderly parents or, whatever it is that is important to you. So, okay. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about how to target companies who need what you have to offer and offer what you need and get really clear on those pieces. We're going to talk about the branding. And the branding is stuff that you can do. And one of the things when people land after they've worked with me, we talk about now, here's what you're going to do moving forward. And you're going to do it consistently. And what that means is you'll constantly be up, not constantly, you'll on a regular basis without wasting time, without stressing about it, because I'm not big on wasting time or stress. Update your LinkedIn profile as you accomplish things in the new job. What does that do? Well, first of all, that means when you decide you want to leave that job, you don't actually have to do a whole remake because you've been nurturing it. So no one's going to actually notice when you're actually looking. It's a little like back in the day when everybody worked in the office 5 days a week. And I would tell people at least once a week, go out to lunch with someone who you don't work with. And that way, when you want to be doing face-to-face networking or, leave at 5 one day a week to go to a networking event, it doesn't send any alarm bells. And that's one reason. But the other reason is nurturing your network and nurturing how you show up on LinkedIn is a huge part of being in a good position when and if you get laid off. And if you haven't been laid off yet in your career, you probably will be. So we're also going to talk about, I kind of spilled the beans here, the connect part. The whole networking strategy. There's things you can do before you're in a job search. There's things that you do when you're in a job search. Obviously, the application strategy is a huge piece too, and knowing when to pivot. And then obviously rocking your interviews and negotiating the best offer for you. So where you are today is the word layoff probably triggered you in some way. I've been laid off. I'm worried about being laid off. I'm in a job search and I'm in a job right now and my last job search was a mess. And I just want some ideas of what to do differently. One of the people that wrote to me with a suggested question was like, I paid for my resume, so my resume is awesome. I hope they're right about that. But what else can I do with LinkedIn? A lot of people don't know how to craft a resume or whether or not the one that they paid for is effective for what they're going after. And if you don't already know what you're going after and you paid for a resume, then the resume may not support what you decide you're going after. But even if it's great, how do I use my LinkedIn profile? Because there are recruiters still in this day, depending on what kinds of companies and what kinds of roles we're talking about, that do use LinkedIn to search for people. It's not all application driven. Even now, where you are today is probably not really having a clear strategy for what to do or how to have it not be all rejections all the time. And then, there's the whole lacking confidence when you interview. I like to say that in 20 years of doing this, I've worked with one person who did not need help on performing in interviews. However, she still needed help in between each step in the interview process. And she was doing it relatively early in the all interviews are remote period, where the number of steps in the interview process dramatically increased. And so it was like, what do I do in between each step? And how do I follow up? And what do I say? And how do I keep things on track? That piece of the puzzle. And so even if you're like her and you would be the second in 20 years, there's still a whole bunch to work on there. So we're going to talk about layoff proofing your career, starting with your LinkedIn profile or how you use LinkedIn, which of course is also the fastest path to your next job. I will let you know about something I'm doing right now for my program because I want you to be able to take advantage of it if you are interested. And so we're gonna talk about where you might have gaps so we can talk about where you need the most support. So that's what we're going to do next. But before we do that, I just want to mention that it's November. And an awful lot of people will tell you that this is not a time to job search. And they're all wrong. And so there's like 3 or 4 reasons why this is a good time for a job search. One is a lot of people believe that it's a bad time to job search. And even if they get laid off right now, they're just going to not do any job seeking until January. What that means is that there have been, the swamps of applications, whatever. So there will be a reduction in people actively job searching right now, no matter what the unemployment rate or layoff rate or whatever is, because so many people believe that story, that myth. So first of all, there's that. Now, why is it for other reasons actually a good time of year? Primary reason, because there are an awful lot of companies with fiscal years that are calendar based. and there is a budget for a position on January 2nd. And when are they going to fill that position? In November and December. So that's huge, 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 huge. They don't want to wait. They don't want to start the job search for that position they have money for on January 2nd. On January 2nd, they want to actually, on January 2nd, have you in the office, or certainly the Monday following, right? Because January 2nd is at the end of the week. But so that's a huge piece of the puzzle. There are actually companies also, they tend to be the really big ones, where there's budget in this fiscal year. And if they don't use the budget now, they're going to not get it next year. Now, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me in my brain from a fiscal perspective, but it is the way government and larger corporations do work in many cases. So that could be a reason why now is actually a good time. And then there's a fourth reason. So we had fewer people are job hunting because they believe the myth. There's the job starting January 2nd. There's they have to spend the money in this year. And the fourth reason is there are an awful lot of events and an awful lot of, no matter what people's spiritual or religious practices are, people wanting to help people and people just having this warm, fuzzy feeling. And there are all these parties and things like that. That's a great time to get out, meet more people, connect with them on LinkedIn, because that is going to be powerful in your job search. More people that you are connected to that you've met in real life is really, really awesome. So make sure that you've stocked your calendar with appropriate events where you'll meet people, ideally people that are related to the things you want to do. But here's the interesting thing. Even if you go to networking, not even a networking event, a holiday party that is not related to work whatsoever, still connect with the people at that party, because they know people that you might need to meet in your job search. So take advantage of all the festive season offers with that. Okay, now we're going to look at gaps. So now that I have busted that myth about this being a bad time of year for your job search, let's talk about where your gaps in your layoff proofing and job search strategy are. So for the most part, most people get on a call like this with me and they're the woman on the left. And where we want them to be is, if not an in-person offer, since nobody really does in-person offers anymore, the virtual version of the congratulations, you get the job. So part of layoff proofing is knowing what you have to offer, what you want from your next job, and who wants what you have to offer. Because if you don't know the answers to all three of those questions, then you really don't know what you're saying, to whom you need to say it, and how to describe what you've done so far. So those three are super relevant and if you are lucky enough that you are still employed, knowing what you want in your next job is super important right now. And I'll tell you something, not only so that you can start planning for how do I show up on my LinkedIn profile, acknowledging what I have to offer, what I want from my next job, and targeting it to the people who want what I have to offer. But there's another thing. While you're still employed, look for opportunities to sign up for projects that will add to your skill set, that will make you more valuable to where you want to be next. So that's a super long-term career gem. So we're going to be scoring things on a scale of 1 to 4. Meh is the icky end, and heck yes is the happy end of our scale. And in between, we have not really and kind of yeah. So if you're comfortable, I'd love it if you'd put it in the comments. If not, you can send me a DM on LinkedIn if that's more comfortable. Here's what you're scoring on that score of 1 to 4. I know what I have to offer, my talents, skills, passions, interests, and experiences. Notice we didn't just talk about work stuff there. I know what I want to need from my next job. I know what companies need, what I have to offer, and are likely to be hiring now. So on a score of 1 to 4, you can drop it in the Facebook or LinkedIn DMs, or you can put it in the comments here in the StreamYard studio or wherever you're watching if you are comfortable doing that. Score of 1 to 4. I know what I have to offer. I know what I want and need. I know what companies need, what I have to offer. Go ahead and drop those in. And that's awesome. Thank you. Yay for the people actually giving me answers, because then I kind of know what we're dealing with and I can help you. So yay you. If you are not in the StreamYard studio, next time you sign up for one of my things, make sure you take advantage of that StreamYard studio link, because I can have a certain number of people in that, and then you get to be in the inside room with me. Okay, let's talk about the branding piece. So once again, I will tell you, first of all, if you're currently employed, I've only ever had one person who was currently employed whose boss was like checking their profile to see if they were cheating on him on a regular basis. Ironically, about 2 weeks after that incident, both my client and that boss lost their jobs in a layoff. I found that a little interesting, but generally speaking, there are ways to do this. Obviously, we're not going to put a green circle around us if we're currently employed, but other than that, and by the way, I'm pro green circle if you're out of work, totally. But there are a lot of things you can be doing and should be doing on an ongoing basis with your LinkedIn profile and to nurture your network. And really think about it as like, this is like my public facing career brand. And there's two things you can do. One is quarterly, you update your current role and what you've accomplished. And the second thing you can do is ideally on a weekly basis, but just like half an hour or 15 minutes twice a week. There's some things you can do to nurture your network on LinkedIn. And that can be huge then when you need your network. So we're going to talk about resume, LinkedIn profile, cover letters, customization plan. Once again, we're going to score it on a scale of 1 to 4, from meh to heck yes. I've crafted a resume and the LinkedIn experience section, and yes, I believe they should be the same. And yes, there's the asterisk that if you have two different versions of your resume, because you might be going for Scrum Master versus product owner, which is different than product management. So you might have two different versions of your resume, because obviously the Scrum Master is going to dive a little bit more deeply into the tech, even though product owners do a fair amount of tech. We're going to have a hybrid of that on your LinkedIn profile. But other than that scenario where you kind of have two different kinds of roles that you might be applying to, where you have two different resumes, generally speaking, if you have one basic resume, you're going to have it match the experience section in LinkedIn. I have crafted that. I have made the most of all the features of my LinkedIn profile to attract recruiters working on my ideal jobs. I schedule time each quarter to update my LinkedIn profile with my latest accomplishments, and time each week to nurture my network. And really, this can be done in very little amounts of time. I'm not about wasting your time. I'm about you having a great life. And I know how to customize my resume and cover letter for each application. So great numbers here. Scale of 1 to 4. I'm going to have a sip of water, and we're going to go on to our next one. Okay. So this is the post-layoff connecting. So the pre-layoff connecting, we kind of put in the branding thing, and that's things like LinkedIn will tell you when people that you are connected to are celebrating a work anniversary. Send them a message. LinkedIn will tell you when people are celebrating a birthday. Send them a message. Know who some of the influencers are in your line of expertise. If you're in product management, a product management influencer. If you're in a certain industry, influencers in that industry. And comment on their posts. And really, once you figure out who those people are, you just have a little list, and you go in and bam, bam, bam. You do that 15 minutes, it's done. What does that do? It gets you seen out and about in the world. It builds relationships. If you have people that you used to work with who are writing about things, bless them, because, and like, this is huge for me. You see one of my posts on LinkedIn, comment on it, emoji it. That actually tells LinkedIn that my stuff, there needs to be more of it, and it helps me. So if I was somebody you wanted in your network that was a relationship you wanted to nurture, you would want to be interacting with my posts on a regular basis. So on a score of 1 to 4, I have an application strategy and execute it every week. Now, for some of you, if you're completely disrupting what you're doing, applications aren't going to work standalone. There's other things that I teach people to do that is, it's a systemic and systematic as an application strategy. We do them in sprints because, yeah, I come out of Silicon Valley, so I'm all about the sprints, but that's also so we can adjust and pivot as we need to. But yes, so an application strategy, or what I call the connect strategy, if you are not a good candidate for applying only. You have a method to track results and pivot when you need to, and you're getting interviews and not crickets. Okay, good numbers there. And now, of course, we've got the impress piece of the puzzle. So, in case you didn't know, the answers in the interview aren't the only part of the interview game. So there's also what I call the inner game of rocking your interviews. And that's about how you show up, whether you need help focusing, whether you need help with confidence, how you handle the curveball question that you weren't prepared for, all of that. That's what I mean by the inner game. And there are very tangible things we do. Also, likability factor, very tangible things to do to prepare for your interviews from an inner game perspective, in addition to the outer game, which is to be prepared for the questions you're going to get asked. And then, of course, there's rocking your negotiation to get what matters most to you. So on a scale of 1 to 4, meh to heck yes. I know how to prepare for the inner game and outer game of interviews. Really, that should be separate bullets. I know how to manage the interview process to get offers, and I know how to negotiate to get what is most important to me. So, one of the things that I want to talk about is what if you just got laid off in the last week? So, just in case somebody is listening to this and you just got laid off, let's talk about what you do first. The first thing you need to do is you need to look at the papers they want you to sign and make sure that you know what you're signing and that it makes sense to sign. Be thinking about health insurance coverage and figure out how you're handling that. Do the scary thing. If you've got severance, that's wonderful. But do the scary thing and look at money and think about unemployment and think about severance and think about whatever it is that's in the bank account. And if there's other income sources in your household, and figure out what's my runway. And then also just do some serious self-care. And if you don't live alone, if you have a significant other, if you have children, you're the priority, but you need to check in with them too, because this is stressful for them also. And so those are all, that's like the first week or two. And then it's time to dive in. So take care of all those things first. Oh, and one last thing I left out of the initial week or two is make sure you're connected with all the people that you want to be connected with on LinkedIn. So any reasonably not horrible relationships with peers, with people who worked for you. Keep in mind, someday you might work for them. But they could go work for other companies that where you need a door opened and you were a great boss. That's a thing you want to do. So peers, people who work for you, bosses, all of that. And then if you had an external facing role and you had relationships externally in conferences and speaking, in with client relationships, connect with those people too, because they could be the doors to your next job. So you want to do all of that. So for those of you who've just been laid off, it's dealing with the legal stuff, dealing with the healthcare stuff, dealing with the money stuff, dealing with your emotional state, your stress load, some self-care, and then all of your family stakeholders in your household if you have any. And then also really making sure you're reaching out and connecting on LinkedIn, because the more people you are connected to that you've had a real relationship with, the more doors you're going to be able to open in your job search. So that's super, super, super huge. And if you were laid off a month or two ago and you haven't done all of that, you can still do that last piece in particular about the reaching out. You can still do that. Do it now. Do it today. It's really important. So, one of the things, I don't have the question posted here, but one of the questions I was asked for today was about, well, I have this great resume and LinkedIn profile, but what else do I do with LinkedIn? So a bunch of different things. One is the nurtured network pieces we've already talked about. Another is Boolean searches for people who are posting jobs on their profiles instead of paying $12,000 a year to post them on LinkedIn. That can be huge. Knowing who it is that might be posting lists of open jobs for your skill set. There are some people doing that. I know there was somebody who was doing marketing jobs and somebody who was doing product jobs for a while there. That's huge. Remember that one of the superpowers of LinkedIn, because LinkedIn really, you're not the customer, you're the product. The customer originally for LinkedIn was recruiters. And so what that means is that the search tools on it are amazing. So if you need to know who the influencers are, who is crafting content in your arena, or who the retained search firms are, that if you're a very senior level person, and that's the only time where I recommend going after those as part of your strategy, whatever it is, you can find those people using those search tools. And that is a huge piece to LinkedIn. So not only is it, am I findable, but it's also, who can I find? And let me talk about one of the things with findable. So they have the skills section on your profile. And they've had that for a long time. And that feeds so that if a recruiter's looking for somebody with certain skills, you'll show up in their search. So you want to fill that out, and you want to make sure the top 2 are the most relevant to your next job, not the current job, but the next job. That's great. Here's where LinkedIn did something kind of wonky in the last year. They now give you the opportunity to tie your skills. And a lot of the skills aren't technical and are not hard skills. They're soft skills. Sometimes they're so soft that they're kind of fluffy and meaningless. And they give you an opportunity to tie them to your different job experiences. And what that does is it junks up your experience section with a whole bunch of mostly fluffy words. And what you want in your experience section is strong active verbs and measurable results that tell people, hiring managers and recruiters, what you have accomplished, because they need to know what you've accomplished so they know if you can accomplish what they need accomplished at their company. And that's what your experience section needs to be, which is why I have my clients have it map their resumes. And when you do that, then you don't want all that extra fluff, because it's taking away and distracting from the serious stuff that you've just communicated. So don't tie your skills to your experience section. Do the skills section and delete the stuff that's irrelevant to the job you're going after now. But don't tie it to your experience section. You do not need to do that. It will not help the recruiters find you. Just doing the skills section will help. So I've already mentioned the fintech startup going from employee 23 to 500 and $100 million exit, and all the VC-backed startup companies, Also have a strong nonprofit background. So if that's something that is part of your world, I speak that language. Led award-winning programs at one of the biggest nonprofit organizations in this country, but also led the turnaround of a small nonprofit that served the HIV positive community in the Castro for a number of years in San Francisco. I've designed talent strategy, like I mentioned, for 25 venture-backed startups with a 64% exit rate. And the number that actually is the most impressive, but notice I'm demonstrating numbers here for you all. It's kind of a little like what you're going to do in your experience section on your LinkedIn profile when you're layoff proofing. I've conducted 12,000 interviews in my career. So I've thought a little bit too much about interviews. So hearing all this stuff today, if you can imagine having someone with the private sector nonprofit background and the 12,000 interviews and the compensation data that is filling my brain and long-term career strategy with someone who's been the boss of a lot of people, and actually cares about your job actually working for your whole life. Okay. What we want to do, look at that. When you convert your Google Slides to PowerPoint without double checking, you get random arrows in different places. Where you are now, where you want to be. So we talked about the 4 things you want to do that not only layoff proof your job search, but also get you on the fastest path to landing that next job. And that's the things that we scored: the target, the brand, the connect, the impress. So a lot of stuff that happens when people work with me. I just want to let you know that I am doing a special offer right now. So if you are interested in working with me or finding out more about that, let me know. Send me a DM or drop something, program in the comments. I am doing a special offer where you'll get 3 months of the program for the price of 2. The way it works is there are 8 small group calls a month, plus a Slack community, plus the gazillion different tools that I've developed over 20 years of doing this, and then one-on-one calls. And so it's like a one-on-one group program done with you, all of it on steroids. So serious discount, because you're going to pay for 2 months instead of 3. So if that is something that you are interested in, do let me know. So if you're not in tech, I got you too, but obviously strong tech background, strong nonprofit background, people who definitely benefit in normal economic situations are people making a change from one arena to another, because those job searches are harder. That said, this is not a normal economic arena, and therefore getting support on your strategy and your execution for your job search can make a huge difference in how long you're hunting, because the job searches are long, and having someone who every week is checking in and like, okay, let's tweak this based on results. So it's, talk about evidence-based. We're looking at the results every week. We're like, okay, we don't like this. We're going to tweak this. That's how you land a job faster. And sometimes that job is, I get a bill paying job and I'm working on a long-term dream job, but the bill paying job is I pay my rent or I pay my mortgage and I'm sleeping at night and I can go for the long term. Sometimes we get the long-term thing right away. And then of course there's all the things that happen when you're actually happier and in a better fitting job that benefits. And this is the lady I was talking about. Her kids were reading below grade level, and by the next school year, we're reading above grade level. And she didn't put that in the testimonial she wrote. She talked about her marriage and her stress levels and everybody being happier and seeing her kids more often. But the thing I'm happiest about is her kids doing better in school. And all that is because of the job change she made. So On that note, I want to thank you for dropping your numbers in. And if you're in studio and you have any questions, drop them in the chat and I will answer them now. And I'm going to go on and see if we have any in LinkedIn. So do I have anyone on in the studio who has a question for me? You can take advantage of your being in studio and ask a question. And if you don't want to speak, you can just put it in the chat. So I'm going to give you a minute just in case somebody has one. And looks like we may have some comments. And we've got people giving me numbers on LinkedIn too. That's awesome. Don't say, okay. So Pragati, what can you DM me on LinkedIn? Let me put my LinkedIn profile just in case you don't have it. And we will get on a call and make that happen. I need help with resume for flight attendants. Okay. I'm not sure. So yes. So and something. So for people who don't want to do my whole program, I do standalone resume sessions. So if that's something that you're interested in, you get a little bit more than a resume. You do some of the work, but you get more than your typical resume writing experience. So yeah. So basically what we do is we do your LinkedIn profile. We go through it all. I give you a whole lot of written instructions. I give you a recorded 90-minute session where we go through every detail of what you need to change based on what your target goals are for your next job. And then you make edits and I review them. And then we green light it and your LinkedIn profile goes live with the new changes. Your resume is ready to go. And for some people, that's really what they want. And then, you can always come back to me later and be like, okay, the resume is awesome, but I still need some other support and that's fine. Or that's all you needed and you're good to go. But yeah, it's kind of a resume LinkedIn plus kind of deal. And by the way, by the end of it, you're going to be better at interviewing because you're going to be much clearer on what you have to offer. Okay. So, Casey, would you DM me and we will make that happen? Because I don't have your emails here. So that would be awesome. And let's just see if we have anybody on. Here. Just want to make sure we don't have any questions on LinkedIn either. Okay. So LinkedIn people. If that's a great idea. Actually, Pragati, if you can give me your email, I'll send you a link since it's just a handful of us in the studio. So if you can give me that, that'd be great. Then I can send you a link so we can get on a call. So LinkedIn people, if you need support on any of this, please, please, please drop me a DM or even just say something in the comments and I will reach out to you and we will make it happen. You do not need to do this alone. I want to thank you for being with me today and for doing the things and participating and asking questions and send me questions before, because it's so much more valuable when you do that. Have an absolutely wonderful rest of your day.